May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The story about the Pharisee and the publican, as it is sometimes known, is a good companion to the story of the forgiving father and his two sons. This is a story for anyone who is overconfident about their own righteousness and has a tendency to look down on other people. So, if none of us have ever done this, if none of us ever do this now, that is, look down on other people, thinking that we are better than they are for some reason, then good. Amen. The sermon is over.
I have a question.
I am looking down on you. So, which is to say, I know at least one person in this room has an issue with that. Once in a while, maybe twice in a while, I have cause to think, oh, well, thank goodness that's not me. So bear with me, if you will, while I think through this. If you want to eavesdrop on my conversation with myself, see if that will be helpful. So I'm a Christian now. I wasn't always. Been one for a while. So I might be very quick to assume now that Jesus is in my heart, that I would never again look down on anybody else as I did in the past. Look down on somebody else because I believe I'm less a sinner than they are. But I wouldn't be honest if I thought that. Because I think, in other words, if I claim without thinking or ignoring the voice of God that it's not me standing in the need of prayer, it's somebody else, then I need to think again. So I find that Jesus is indeed speaking to me today, perhaps to more than me. Jesus is telling me today, as in all days, I have a choice. I can choose. I can continue to be more like that puffed up, self-righteous Pharisee, or more like that humble tax collector. So if you remember the message from last week about the two sons and the father, you will recognize the same characters in a different setting. The Pharisee is the older son, the equivalent. He's full of pride, confidence in himself, and he's fully up to justifying his status before God and despising the other fella, the equivalent of the younger brother, who has disgraced himself. The younger brother spent all his father's inheritance in living in a horrible way. The tax collector has gotten himself in a fix because of his dishonest lifestyle. So we have the equivalent of the older brother and the younger brother. One of them is full of self-righteousness, and the other in the moment is full of self-loathing and regret. And he is pleading for mercy. He has opened himself up. He is even too ashamed of himself to look to heaven. So let's admit it, the Pharisee does behave pretty well in a religious sense. He fasts twice a week and tithes. That gives 10% of his money. And to be honest, that's more than I often do. Problem, though, is the Pharisee is extremely proud of himself and feels like he's done all he needs to do. He's self-righteous because of these religious habits. And he has grown in doing them to feel superior to people who do worse and or less than he does. So why do you suppose Jesus thinks he has a big attitude problem? So the tax collector is standing off, kind of in the corner, with his head down. Now, we need to assume that he also is a Jew because he's there. He's there in church. They're there together. It isn't unreasonable to assume, since he's a public figure as well, that he also fasts and he tithes. He also shows up in the equivalent of church on Sunday. There he is, coming to pray. So he's a religious guy, just like the Pharisee is. But his shame is that outside of his religious habits, he works for the Romans. He takes commissions from the tax money he collects from Rome. And to be very successful, as he has become, he takes more than strictly he needs to. This is how he makes his living. There's nothing the matter with taking commissions. The laborer is worthy of his or her hire, but he's taken more than he needs to. Basically, stealing money from his neighbors and his friends, and can get away with it because he's got the Roman soldiers and the Roman government standing behind him. So his job, this religious guy, his job requires him to be sort of a traitor to his own people and kind of a parasite living off of the well-being of his neighbors. So he knows when it comes to what really matters that his fasting and his tithing and his showing up to church don't make up for his life. He knows, standing before God, that he does not behave goodly. I mean righteously. And he knows that God knows this, so he's standing there feeling anguish over his need for the forgiveness he knows he doesn't deserve. It's a lot like the prodigal son. I'm out of options. I'll drag myself home to Dad. He won't forgive me, but at least maybe he'll give me a place to sleep. Here is this guy dragging himself, the equivalent to church on Sunday, and too embarrassed about his life to even sing a hymn or say a prayer or make eye contact with anybody, much less look up to heaven. So what does Jesus say about these two men and their posture and attitude in prayer? One of them gets to go home justified and forgiven. The other one doesn't. It's not the Pharisee. What do you think about that? So I think, putting myself in the story, if I put on the Pharisee's robe and posture, it creates opportunities for me to be full of myself, to look down on other people, maybe even to be resentful toward others. If I wear the tax collector's robe, which unfortunately is a good fit, I have the opportunity to feel loved and to feel very grateful. And perhaps like Zacchaeus, to have my life changed. It's a relief to admit that I can't by my own strength or willpower live up to God's standards. It's a relief. Paul said it to other people who also must have needed to hear it. He said, "There is no one who is righteous." There is no one who is righteous. No, not one. So I can't, in all honesty and truth, say, It's me, O Lord, I'm the good one. But I can say with a lot of confidence that it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. I was thinking about how to convey my sense of God's love and of my shortcomings. So my thoughts turned to the basketball hoop that sits out in the southwest 40 of our property. That basketball hoop used to sit in my driveway in another place, in another life. The cool thing about this hoop is that the height of the rim is adjustable. With a little stick, you can raise it and lower it. I think now it's set at the standard for a basketball hoop, which is 10 feet. That's for big people. But in the past, that hoop has been set much lower, because in the past, my boys were much lower. And so, learning how to shoot a basket, we set it down as low as it would go. It'll go down to 6 feet, which is, it's only about there, which is pretty high for a small person. It was fun because for me, with the hoop at that height, you know what I could do? I could slam dunk. Yeah, it felt awesome. I'm sure if you're thinking about it, it isn't awfully impressive though, is it? Remembering when I had better legs and less mass to get off the ground, I used to aim in the gym at school at jumping up and touching the rim of the basket, set at 10 feet. I could get about that close. And then by accident one day, I kind of hopped down the gym and I wasn't even thinking, and I leapt up and I touched the rim. Yes, exactly. I heard angels. Oh, it's like I was flying. I was never able to do that again. I was a sophomore in high school. Last time I touched the rim of a basketball hoop at 10 feet. In my wildest dreams, though, and sometimes actually in my dreams, I could leap up high enough to slam dunk the basketball. I actually dreamt about this. I really wanted to do it. I still am in awe of people who can slam dunk a basketball. It's quite a popular thing. Something we love to watch in basketball is that slam dunk. But I think it must be easy for certain people, because those certain people are so very tall and athletic, which I am not. You know, I don't know if you've ever done it. It's hard enough just to shoot a ball through a basketball hoop that's set at 10 feet. It takes a lot of practice. And that's why we started with the rim so low with the boys. And eventually we worked it up. And we eventually had a lot of fun. Now, a little flight of fancy. Imagine if someone took me out and said, we're going to play basketball, one-on-one. And this person is, 6'8". And I've got my hoop, and this girl has got her hoop. Seriously. Okay? So, my hoop is set at 10 feet. Her hoop is set at 6 feet. This person is a professional basketball player. I'm a hacker, and I'm 64. And we're playing. Guess who's going to win? And then, once I am completely defeated, imagine that person standing over me, gloating and harping about how bad a player I am. And if I just tried harder, I could have given her a game. Imagine that. Well, that 6'8" girl is the Pharisee in a nutshell. It's not fair. I remember once there was a proposal to raise the height of a professional basketball hoop to 12 feet from 10 feet. That's because I think the impression was it was getting too easy to score. Everybody was dunking it, and instead of passing around and making actual shots, you just go up to the basket and ram it through. So, well, let's make it more challenging. It'll make the game more entertaining, and it'll make it more equitable for the smaller players. The proposal died very quickly when the league figured out that everybody loved to watch people slam dunk basketballs, and nobody could slam dunk the basketball when the hoop was at 12 feet. Nobody could do it. Welcome to my reality. In fact, welcome to our reality as people. Welcome to our spiritual reality. Welcome to our situation before God. Because God's room is set at least 20 feet high. It's way up there in terms of standards of being good. We read those 10 commandments this morning. Okay, how many of us have managed to get through the last week or month without bending any of those a little bit? You have to keep them perfectly. There's no skinch. Even the spiritually tallest of us are never going to be able to slam dunk. We can try harder, but jumping harder doesn't make us go much higher, and it doesn't make the rim come any closer. Because metaphorically, our knees are bad, and someone taller is always in the way, tends to block our shots and play defense. You don't get free access. So if we had to win at this basketball game to get saved and get God's approval, we would all be sunk, slam dunk. Don't we all want very much to fulfill the great commandment? To love the Lord our God with all our heart and soul and strength and mind. Don't we want to? And don't we want very much to love our neighbor as ourselves? But I just can't seem to do it consistently, perfectly, every day. I may manage the feeling of it once. I may do an act of kindness that surprises me, and then I think, I've done it. I know how to do this, and then something comes up that throws me off, and I feel angry, or I feel resentful towards someone, or I get distracted, full of myself, and before you know it, I am bending, again, the great commandment, if not breaking it. Now, I feel very sorry when I do that, when I fail, and perhaps I should also feel sorry when I fail and those times that I don't even notice that I fail. Those times when I've gotten to thinking my slam dunk at the 6-foot rim must look pretty impressive. Yes, it's me, O Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Not my mother, not my father. Yes, the preacher, not the deacon. Not my brother, not my sister, it's me. And maybe since you all sang that song with me this morning, maybe you're willing to admit that it's you too. Now, isn't that an interesting song? Because it has a catchy beat. And you start singing it and you want to go, yeah, it's me, I am broken, I'm a sinner. Boy, why am I dancing to this? Well, it is good news to know that. That is the first step toward healing and wholeness, is to know that, to admit that. And it's not thankful that I'm that way, it's thankful that the grace of God is so immense and perfect that we are encompassed by it, and everyone is encompassed by it. And we don't have to prove anything. We just need to be aware that we need the grace of God. So, which character went home from church that day with the capacity to grow and get better. The Pharisee, no, because he already knew he was perfect, so what more is there to do except to enjoy my marvelous perfection? The tax collector, that stinker. Well, if he felt forgiveness, maybe a few days later, he might have been out in the community and Jesus would have come by and he couldn't see Jesus and he wanted to, so maybe he climbed a tree to see Jesus better. And maybe he got told that he was going to have a visitor. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house today. You don't have to come to me. I'm coming to you. Crazy. And so Jesus did. And he was so moved by that grace that he promised to repay all the people he cheated double and give half of everything he currently had to help the poor. And from then on, a happy man living a different life, one on the road to being better and being happy. Now, I find that really interesting. Little old Zacchaeus in the shadow of a 20-foot hoop with a basketball in his hand and smiling. Amen.